For our entire lives, we've all been told the same basic story, right? We're born, we live, and then we die. It's just a straight line with a very final, very unavoidable end. But what if that story, the most fundamental story we tell ourselves, is just wrong? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty mind-bending framework for reality called the totality, and it suggests that maybe, just maybe, our greatest fear is nothing more than a failure of perspective.
And this question is really the heart of it all. What if death is an illusion? And I don't mean that in some poetic circle of life kind of way. I mean in a real physical sense. What if the whole idea of an end is just a huge misunderstanding, something born from our very limited view of how the universe actually works? It's a wild thought for sure, but it's one that this framework, the totality, takes very, very seriously.
This quote really gets to the core of the problem. We feel like we're on this one-way train track called time. We can remember the past, but we can't go back. The future is a total mystery, and that track seems to lead to a very clear, very final station. And it's that perception that builds the cage, the one that traps us in this fear of mortality.
So our whole fear is rooted in this finite view of our own existence. We see ourselves as these temporary little sparks in an endless darkness. But what if we could just step outside of that cage and see things differently? The totality offers a new map to do just that. And it's not based on wishful thinking, but on a really radical shift in how we see everything.
So, to build this new map, the totality gives us what you could call a conceptual toolkit. Now, this isn't some formal peer-reviewed scientific theory. Instead, it's three really powerful ideas that when you put them all together, they completely reframe our place in the cosmos.
The first tool in our kit is something called the block universe. It sounds super futuristic, but the idea actually has its roots in Einstein's theory of relativity. It basically says that time doesn't flow like a river. Instead, and get ready for this, the past, the present, and the future all exist right now simultaneously. Your entire life is a single, complete, and static block of space-time, where every moment is just as real as this. Okay, I know that sounds strange, so here's a great way to picture it. Think about this ruler. All the inch marks exist at the same time, right? The 2-inch mark doesn't disappear just because you're looking at the 3-inch mark. Well, in the block universe, your life is like that ruler. Your consciousness is just the thing measuring one moment at a time, creating the illusion that time is flowing. But your childhood, it's still there. It's a permanent location in space-time, just like the 2-inch mark is a permanent location on the ruler. It's all part of one big complete object. Okay, tool number 2 is a classic thought experiment for stretching our minds. It's called the flatland analogy. I want you to picture these little beings that live in a perfectly flat, two-dimensional world. For them, a piece of paper is their entire universe. Now, what do you think they would see if a three-dimensional object from our world passed right through theirs?
Well, they wouldn't see a sphere, that's for sure. They'd see a dot that appears out of thin air, grows into a circle, then shrinks back down to a dot and vanishes. To them, it would look like some kind of bizarre, impossible magic. But for us, looking from our 3D perspective, it's just a simple ball passing through a sheet of paper. And here's the profound lesson. What if the strangest paradoxes in our world, all that quantum weirdness, are just the confusing shadows of a simpler, more elegant truth that exists in a higher dimension we just can't perceive?
And this brings us to our third and honestly most important tool. It's a total flip in what we think reality is even made of. See, we instinctively see a universe filled with things, planets, particles, people. But the totality says, nope, you've got it backward. It proposes that reality is fundamentally made of relationships and connections. The web of interactions comes first, and the things we see are just the stable points, the nodes, where all those threads of connection cross.
Just this one shift changes absolutely everything. So let's look at it side by side. The old view we're all used to, it's a universe of things, moving through linear time, where our self is made of physical substance. The totality flips that whole script. Now we have a universe of relationships, existing in an atemporal reality, meaning time doesn't flow, and where the self is not a substance, but a persistent pattern.
All right, so we've been talking about these huge cosmic ideas, a timeless universe, a web of relationships, but what on earth does that have to do with you? Let's bring this all down to a really personal level.
What exactly is the self in this new kind of reality? I want you to seriously think about this for a second. Over about 7 years or so, your body replaces nearly every single atom it's made of. The physical stuff that makes you you is constantly being swapped out. So if you're not the stuff, what are you? And this isn't some new age question. It's actually a really ancient paradox. The ancient Greeks told this story about the ship of Theseus. The hero's ship was so beloved that the people preserved it by replacing every single rotting plank with a new one. They did this over and over until, eventually, not a single original plank was left. And the big question they asked was, is it still the ship of Theseus? This is the exact same paradox that applies to you and me.
And the solution becomes so clear when you think in terms of a relational universe. The ship's identity was never about the wood planks. It was about the pattern they formed, its design, its history, its purpose. And the very same thing is true for you. You are not the temporary atoms that are just passing through your system. You are the continuous, persistent pattern that those atoms create. That unique pattern of your thoughts, your memories, your relationships, that's what lasts.
So this leads us to the most profound and I think most beautiful part of this whole framework. If you are a pattern and you exist inside a timeless block universe, what does that pattern actually look like from a higher dimensional point of view? The answer gives us a completely new and, honestly, an incredibly empowering picture of what consciousness really is.
See, your consciousness isn't just a tiny little dot, a spotlight moving along your timeline. It's more like a dynamic wave of coherence that is spread out along your entire life's path, your world line. It's a structure that kind of pulls future possibilities into the single moment we call the present, and that moment then radiates out into the past as what we call memory. It's this continuous pulse that we experience as the flow of time.
And this is what you look like from that higher perspective. From the viewpoint of the totality, your consciousness is this beautiful, glowing, diamond-shaped pattern called the lozenge of self. It's a permanent feature that's literally etched into the fabric of space-time. It doesn't start at birth and stop at death. The entire pattern of your life, from your first breath to your last, exists eternally as one complete, shining whole. And from this vantage point, the idea of an end doesn't even make sense. This completely reframes what it means to be alive. Your life isn't some tragedy that's doomed to end in nothingness. It's an unbelievably rare and improbable pattern of order and self-awareness in a vast cosmos of pure chaos. Your existence, this glowing lozenge, is a beautiful exception. It's a permanent piece of art that's woven into the very fabric of reality itself.
So, if we accept this, that we are these permanent, intricate patterns in a timeless reality, it leaves us with one final, profound question. If this beautiful, eternal structure is what our consciousness is, then what's its ultimate potential? What can a pattern that has become complex enough to actually think about itself eventually become? The path forward and the potential is truly limitless.